Let us shift gears now towards Friedrich Nietzsche. There are important things that need to be said about Nietzsche. Nietzsche was a philosopher that believed himself to be ahead of his time. He lived from 1844 to the 1900s. Of course, it is well known that he collapsed of syphilis, I believe, when he was 1890, and lived the last 10 years of his life in insanity. But I like to draw attention to several of the ideas that Nietzsche had to express, and specifically his foretelling. There are many aspects of Nietzsche that are quite fascinating, and he is called the philosopher or the prophet of the 20th century. He was able to foresee what others had was imperceptible to them. Nietzsche had much more discernment to see the negative implication of what was to come in history. And of course, when we came into World War I and World War II and the Holocaust and the Cold War and now terrorist attacks, then we can say, oh my goodness, now we understand what Nietzsche was talking about. The 20th century is a century of irrationality. It's a century of moral confusion and grotesque sins against human beings. A world without God, a world without meaning. So I will be referring to this book. I mentioned it before. It's an excellent summary of Christianity in the last 300 to 400 years. Very valuable sources. In Nietzsche, Nietzsche is going to be the founder of nihilism. Nihil means nothing in Latin, and in this case, nihilism means nothingism. And what Nietzsche is going to speak, I'm going to just emphasize that. And you can look it up. It's called The Death of God, and the story is The Madman. So you can look up The Madman and Nietzsche. And I will read to you the story and explain the meaning of that. Because in one simple story and an allegory, which is 1 page long, Nietzsche is able to capture what is to come in the 20th century. Existentialism, which I briefly described with A Stranger, highly recommended. Existentialism was an attempt at trying to create meaning subjectively, trying to make sense of an objectively meaningless world. We know there is nothing to be known for sure, but we can at least create our own reality. The most succinct summary of existentialism is existence precedes essence, which means we can make ourselves whatever we want, and it is our choices and our desires and our goals that determine the future, and what is meaningful and not anything else. There is a famous quote in Macbeth, and I'll read it to you, full of sound and fury. It is his most nihilistic statement that you have there. And again, this is Shakespeare, superb. It is too bad that Shakespeare has been removed from our curriculum. The more I know Shakespeare, the more I admire him. So this is a little line that summarizes existentialism to its uttermost. It says, Macbeth, after he committed murder and listened to his wife and so on, he says, tomorrow and tomorrow and tomorrow creeps in this petty pace from day to day, to the last syllable of recorded time, and all yesterdays have lighted fools the way to dusty death. Out, out, brief candle, life is but a walking shadow, a poor player that struts and frets his hour upon the stage and then is heard no more. It is a tale told by an idiot, full of sound and fury, signifying nothing. So there you have Shakespeare, just in his magnificent way of explaining it. Yes, you go through routines day to day to day after day, and life begins to eat away at you. Your zeal for your vocation, for your job, begins to lose its vibrancy. Your love for your wife becomes monotonous. Your children become ordinary. There's nothing extraordinary about them. And then your goals and ambitions become just like everybody else's. There is a great story called "The Death of Ivan Illich" by Leo Tolstoy. Again, a jewel of a literary. It's about 50 pages long. Superb. but Ivan wants to be better and above everybody else, and he ends up being the same as everybody else. And that's the crude reality of it. So day after day, this pity pace creeps into our lives. Life becomes less and less meaningful. And then he speaks about the lighted fools that came before us and how they thought themselves to be something and they ended up being nothing. Out, brief candle, the life going out of you. And then he says, life is but a tale told by an idiot. It's full of sound and fury, signifying nothing. So out of all the combustion, all the dreams and illusions and all the commotion and so on, it amounts to absolutely nothing. So that's a nihilism. So what you have here, and I want to read this story and I want to explain it to you briefly. Nietzsche put it together in a short little story. He says, it's called the Madman, look it up. Have you not heard that the madman who lit a lantern in the bright morning hours ran to the marketplace and cried incessantly, quote, I seek God, I seek God, end quote. As many of those who do not believe in God were standing around just then, he provoked much laughter. Why did he get lost? Said one. Did he lose his way like a child? Said another. Or is he hiding? Is he afraid of us? Has he gone on a voyage or emigrated? Thus they yelled and laughed. The madman jumped into their midst and pierced them with his glances. What he is expressing here, and he will get more detail in this next paragraph, Nietzsche is telling the European consciousness, God has lost its relevance in our lives. You guys are practical atheists. God no longer exists. We have killed him, and you are the murderers. Now, he doesn't mean that there was a being called God and somehow we slew him. What he means is all that theism had to offer, and the importance of a personal infinite God in the lives of human beings and decision making is for all practical purposes being removed from Western consciousness. You guys are practical atheists. And because you have removed God from the center of life, you are left with nothing. And all you will be left with is going to be death and destruction, but you don't understand that. And it will be, of course, 60 years later when you wake up from the Holocaust and from World War II, and we looked at ourselves and we found ourselves to be utterly pitiful and naked. And then we recognize the degree of depravity that we have been capable of, and we continue to engage in it. And yet there seems to be no end in sight, and the only thing that can reconcile human beings with a meaningful existence is the existence of God, who is an infinite point of reference by which we can make sense of life, and that is no longer there for the ordinary human being. We try to make sense of life in every other sense through gender identity and through politics and conservatism and electing this person and the other and economic reforms and in the end we're just left with nothing. So he's going to explain it here in very vivid terms, Nietzsche, in this poetic fashion. By the way, Nietzsche is believed to be the best prose writer in the German language in its entire history. So he's quite a gifted man. At the age of 24, he was a full-time professor at a time when you have a handful of universities in Germany. So you have to be just an erudite to be able to accomplish something like that. So his intelligence is not to be questioned. He's quite brilliant. Whether it's God, he cried, I shall tell you. We have killed him, you and I. All of us are his murderers. But how can we have done this? How were we able to drink up the sea? Who gave us the sponge to wipe away the entire horizon? What did we do when we unchained the earth from its sun? Whether it is moving now, whether are we moving now, away from all suns? Are we not plunging continually backwards, sidewards, forward in all directions? Is there any up or down anymore? Are we now straying as through an infinite nothing? That's where nihilism comes in. You have detached God, the world from God, and now the world is just simply a ball of gas surrounded in this infinite universe that is totally and utterly aimless and purposeless. You guys have wiped the horizon. There is no future to be had. There is no culmination to human history. All that is left to us is the present and the misery of our existence. Away from all suns, are we plunging continually backwards, sideways, forwards in all directions? Is there any up or down? Are we now straying as through an infinite nothing? Do we not feel the breath of empty space? Has it not become colder? Is it not night and more night coming? On all the while, must not lanterns be lit in the morning? Do we not hear anything yet of the noise of the grave diggers who are burying God? Do we not smell anything yet of God's decomposition? By that, of course, he's talking about the moral institutions, the family, the educational establishment, the church. God is dead and you guys do not see it. Do we not smell anything yet of the divine decomposition? God's do decompose. God is dead, God remains dead, and we have killed him. And then he closes with this powerful remark: how shall we, the murderers of all murders, comfort ourselves? What was holiest and most powerful of all in the world has yet what was holiest and most powerful of all that the world has yet owned has bled to death under our knives. Who will wipe his blood from us? What waters is there for us to clean ourselves? What festivals of atonement? What sacraments? What sacred games? Is not the greatness of this deed too great for us? Must not we ourselves become gods simply to seem worthy of it? There has never been a greater deed, and whoever will be born after us for the sake of this deed, he will be part of the highest history hitherto. And so what Nietzsche is going to get here is God is dead, we are left desolate, and we are left to ourselves. There is no recourse, there is to be no mercy. We are going to be left in a meaningless existence. And then the madman fell silent and looked again at his listeners, and they too were silent and looked at him in astonishment. At last he threw his lantern on the ground and he broke it and went out. I came too early. That kind of captures Nietzsche has this sense about himself where he was prematurely speaking of things that human beings had not cared to reflect upon. I came too early, he said. My time has not yet come. This tremendous event is still on its way, still wandering. It has not yet reached the ears of men. And that is the the devastation that will come in the 20th century. Lightning and thunder require time. The light of the stars requires time. Deeds require time before they can be seen and heard. And then he says, this deed is still more distant from them than the most distant stars, and yet we have done it ourselves. So that is the Nietzsche's assessment of the death of God. And he says his very closing remark is, it has been related further that on that same day the madmen entered diverse churches and there sang the Requiem Aeternam Deo. Let out and called to account is said to have replied each time, what are these churches now if they are not the tombs and sepulchres of God? So this is the warning of nihilism in the 1880s, and the sad reality is that this empty fulfillment of life took place in the 20th century. Okay, we can talk further on it, and let me know if we need to. If you have any questions about it, I could go on and on with several books that I have for you guys that I have read and analyzed in the past, but I'll pass here. Bye.